welcome to TERF WARS. I hope you're enjoying my look. I just did a getting ready stream, which was exciting. Thanks for everyone who's made it to both. I managed to get everything edited quite early this week, which was rare. Anyway, thank you for coming along to hear me rant about transphobes. So for anyone who's new, TERF WARS, let me know in the chat if you can hear me. Thank you. I'm loving all the duck emojis. So for anyone who doesn't know, TERF WARS is the show where I go through the last week's worth of transphobic, TERF, gender critical nonsense. And we look at it together, we laugh at it together, we debunk the arguments together, and it makes it marginally better. So that's the point of the show. So thank you very much for stopping by. Something that I always point out is that I've gone through and edited all of these pictures so to make them anonymous. So the idea is that we're going to look at the things that people are saying and address their ideas. We're not going to target certain people. So don't go and find who these people are. Don't go and harass them. Don't reply to them. It's just not worth it. That said, few of them aren't anonymous, and it's when they're much bigger accounts, and it's important to note who the person is. But also sometimes I anonymise big accounts too. It depends whether it's relevant, basically. But yeah, anyway, welcome. I hope everyone's having a good Friday. I'm drinking Corona, as is the theme of the last 2 years. I guess just 1 year, but it feels like 2 years, doesn't it? It's been a flipping long time. But anyway, I have, this week, I have the most amount of slides I've ever had. But there's a few fast slides, so we'll get through it. But there was quite a few big things that happened this week. But I guess we might as well get into it. So exciting. So I thought I would start off with, I think, a perfect encapsulation of what the UK's modern, today, gender critical movement is. If someone said, like, but what do they do? What do they think? What kind of person is a gender critical person? I think this, which is from Mumsnet, which is a place which is like gender critical headquarters, GCHQ. So this person is responding to a post. So the original post said, "You're not being discriminated against because DWP used the word gender instead of sex." So I probably should have looked up what DWP stands for before I started. But it's something to do with employment, helping you get benefits and things. And the person has a point. You're not being discriminated against because they use the word gender instead of sex. In the TERF wars, in the last 2 years, gender critical people have made it so sex and gender are such important signifiers for them. Like, sex is everything and gender is nothing. But for like 99% of the population, they mean the same thing. Like, people don't even notice when you switch them. If you see single gender toilets, single sex toilets, people just think the same thing. I mean, because they are the same thing. Because the people who wrote the signs think they're the same thing. They mean the same thing. So that means loads of forms say gender, loads of forms say sex, and that's just what they say. But gender critical people read into it. Anyway, this person's reply to that comment was, and I think this sums up the gender critical movement. Someone's like, but those words mean the same thing. You're not being discriminated against. And their reply was, "So, would you be happy to undress in front of a male with a beard who self-IDs as a woman on Thursday afternoons?" What? They're talking about what, like, a form had the word gender on instead of sex, and you're all angry about it. And now you're talking about some man with a beard who's getting naked in front of you while you're queuing to get your benefits or like to get a job, or what are you talking about? And it's just so hyperbolic. Oh, it's just nonsense. Like, this is the kind of thing that always escalates to. It's just like, well, my daughter is a trans woman and, you know, she's at university and, you know, she's used the women's toilets for the last 8 years of her life, and I just hope that she, she's worried about the future for the country. And they're like, so do you just want to get undressed in front of a bearded man? It's like, what are you talking about? I know that this is how you got radicalized into this movement, imagining this literally impossible, in this case, scenario, but this very extreme scenario, which hasn't been happening for the last 100 years of trans people. So, like, it just doesn't justify anything, and it doesn't justify getting angry about a form. Angry about a form is going to be a theme for this week, as we'll see in a second. We've got just another, I think, summing up the gender critical argument position. So this person makes two clear statements. Trans women are male. Misogyny is used to oppress females. And they are two very common gender critical assertions. I would say they're absolutely core to the worldview, and they're often build all of their arguments upon particularly the first one. The second one is for the people who are still pretending to be feminists. But then I'm not just going to big up my own tweets this whole time, but I just think this kind of sums it up, and it's important to point this out. If trans women are male, premise 1, and misogyny is used to oppress females, premise 2, but then we can just look and observe, observably true, demonstrably true, a fact is that trans women face misogyny. So, either one of your two premises is wrong. Like, they're the only that's the only option. One of them is wrong, the other's wrong, or they're both wrong. And like, if you were just a feminist and you were approaching this, you'd be like, well, misogyny is used to oppress females. And you'd be like, well, yes, exactly. Females, including trans women. And they would just be like, well, yeah, obviously, because trans women face misogyny, because obviously, of course they do. But when you're in this world where male and female means trans women are male, then you're having to deny this like observable reality that trans women face misogyny, which is the other theme of our episode. There's 3 themes for this episode. One is forms, one is people denying that trans women face misogyny, and the third one is boobies. Actually, I need to get a good shot for the thumbnail. Anyway, so I just thought that encapsulated this, and this is such a hole in the mainstream gender critical viewpoint, and it's one I bring up all the time, and they just have nothing to address it. All they can do is deny that trans women face misogyny, and then they go down this route of like having to say that somehow some random misogynist who's shouting at you on the street either won't do that to trans women magically because he won't be able to shout at someone because of their chromosomes even if he doesn't know, or they'll have to say that it doesn't technically count as misogyny because of definition, but then like the man or woman who's saying something misogynistic, their intention is misogyny. That's the thing that is causing them to act. So it's so nonsense. Anyway, we best move on because there's a lot of slides. So, Monday morning, woke up to trending on Twitter, 2 brilliant things to see. TERFs was trending and boycott the census was trending. I was like, oh God, here we go. There was also some other gender critical hashtag trending. It's just so tedious. One thing that is worth pointing out though is, this might sound really stupid to everyone, but I easily forget that this says trending in the United Kingdom, and sometimes it says trending in the world, but there's only 4,000 tweets, and half of those are trans people talking about it. And Twitter does merge in big trending topics with like trending for you. And obviously Twitter sussed me out as someone who would react to these things, and it shows me, and like some other big trending thing was like some football thing, and it had like 3 million tweets, and then like it was below one of these or something. It's very easy to think that they're gaining all this ground, and it's all just in our little local echo chambers. And if it's only got 4,000 tweets, unless you're a gender critical person or a trans person, you're not going to see these. So it's kind of pointless. Anyway, woke up to these and I was like, what the hell is boycott the census? Well, the UK has a census coming up, which is where you fill in a form which says everyone who lives at your house, so they can get they can get a feel for all the various people who live in the country. You know what different ages people are, what different races people are, and all these things. It's a good way of collecting data about people. And the gender critical people are very angry because they found out the questions on there. This year, there's a question about trans people. We're just about to go into the questions, but let's just look at what they've said first. So, Fair Play for Women, one of the biggest, most well-funded gender critical organisations, says, breaking, we're pleased to announce that Fair Play for Women has instructed a barrister to evaluate the lawfulness of the ONS, which is the people running the census, approach regarding the definition of sex on the census. If ONS has broken the law, we will hold them to account in the High Court by judicial review. Like, gender critical people absolutely loving judicial reviews at the moment because they had some success with one of them. And it's a good way of raising loads of money. So they'll probably raise £30,000, seems to be the amount they usually raise on one of these crowdfunders, to waste everyone's time over the wording of a question on the census, which is coming out in March. So they've obviously already printed it all and organised it all. And like the chance that this is going to achieve anything is negligible. And here's Man Friday, which is some other organisation, which is much smaller, who's saying they're going to donate. But it's not just that they have a small chance here. It's also, like, I get stressed by all of these things because you never know. They might, win and be able to roll back trans rights in a small way, or just get some, like, morale boost for them winning in court or something. This, I genuinely don't care at all. And we'll see why in a minute. But, like, just to show how devoted some people are to these things. This is Fair Play for Women's, like, 1 millionth crowdfunder. And this is, like, I'm writing an article on it at the moment, but since 2017, though mainly in 2019 to 2020, gender critical people have raised £1.3 million in crowdfunders, mainly to do lawsuits about trans rights. Most of them have failed, over half have failed, but there was obviously the Kira Bell one, which was a big success. And Fair Play for Women and Transgender Trend have both raised loads of money, not for lawsuits, which is just, who knows. But anyway, someone here has donated £500 to sue the people who are running the census over the question that's going to be asked about sex. Just look at that again. Regarding the definition of sex in the census. Okay. So, of course, because every time gender critical people come up with anything, the UK press backs them uncritically without even consulting with a trans person or asking anyone who knows anything about the situation. So the Telegraph had this article. Changes to census data collection on biological sex could hamper clinical research. So this is, they're saying it's changing, like the biological sex question is all wrong. The census will introduce a new voluntary question on transgender identity for people age 16 and over. So I'm not really sure why that's relevant. Anyway, we'll find out in a minute. So the Telegraph did that article. The Telegraph also did this article, Statistics on Gender Obscured by Self-ID. We're on the brink of losing robust, high-end, high-quality data on sex in the UK. Academics, I wonder who, said, once gone, we may never get it back. Okay, so the Telegraph also did this article. It would be a grave mistake to stop collecting biological data in the census. Addressing the inequalities women face necessitates that we are able to record, describe, and analyse how sex impacts women's life chances. This one is by Jane Claire Jones. So just remember that name. She's one of the, I guess, more influential gender critical people in the UK. I have cat hair stuck in my makeup. Ooh. So the Telegraph is all in on this. 3 articles in 1 week about exactly the same thing with the same headline. Talking about, like, you're getting the gist here. The data on sex is gone. Like, quite a big deal. How can we possibly address, there's so many issues that women face differently to men, or that men face differently to women. And, this collecting data in the census can make a really big difference to analysing that. So let's just have a look at the questions. So the census happens every 10 years. And it's 2021 this year, so the last one was in 2011. And as we can see here, question 2, what is your sex? With only 2 options, male or female. So in 10 years before that, 2001, here is the question 2, what is your sex? Male or female? So let's go back a further 10 years to 1991. What is your sex? Male or female? And let's go all the way back to the one before I was born, 1981. What is your sex? Male or female? So there's a pretty clear pattern here. Every single one for for my entire life, I'm 31, but the last 40 years of censodes, have had, what is your sex? Male or female? So that's why I agree, so angry at the new census, which has the question, what is your sex? Female or male? But, of course, with an optional extra question, 27, which says, is the gender you identify with the same as your sex registers at birth? This question is voluntary, yes or no right in gender identity. So, what? And this goes into how ridiculous this is and how there's so much to say about this. For the first time ever, we've got a question where we're going to find some data out about trans people, and that is very good. I think that every trans person in the country, sorry to everyone from other countries, this isn't so exciting now, but I think everyone who gets a chance to fill this in should consider filling in this optional question, because having numbers on how many trans people there are in the UK is a good thing. And if it turns out there are more of us than they're expecting, then they'll have to consider allocating funds, how important the laws are. All of the political parties will know what the voting strength of trans people are. There's a lot here. If, they do keep this data secret for 100 years, I think. So if you're stealth and you fill this in, no one should technically see it. But then, do you trust the government with your data? I don't know. It's something that you should consider. But I would say fill it in truthfully if you trust that to happen, to be safe, because it could be good for all trans people. But so we've got this question, and there's no actual gender critical people don't lose. I mean, some of them are obviously just going to get angry that this is included, but really this should be good for them. But I think they've just got this idea that for the first time ever, trans women particularly will be ticking female in the what is your sex question. But what do you think they've done for the last 100 years? Or however long the census has been running? What do you think they did in 2011? It wasn't even a trans question. So they would have thought, well, obviously female is my sex, and female better represents me, and it better represents me more than male. And importantly, when considering statistics like violence against women and providing funding for women's services and stuff, it makes sense that I record myself as a woman because they're the issues that I face in my life. I don't know. We don't know what percentage of trans women tick female and what percentage of trans men tick male. But I wouldn't be surprised if it was almost all of them every single census ever. I know I would have. If I wasn't on Twitter, I wouldn't even know this was a thing, and I would have ticked female without even thinking. Because I tick female in every single form that I fill in for the last 6 years. Because it's the one that better represents me, obviously. And that's always happened. And if they sue this company, I mean, what are they going to do? Get them to change? They could get rid of this question. They could have some, I mean, I guess they want it to say, what is your birth sex? Which would be different to the last 40 at least years of censodes. It's just so ridiculous. And even if they did change it to say, what is your birth sex? There would be this big story about it. And every trans person who's going to hear, oh, gender critical people have sued the government to get them to change. I'm just going to take female anyway, mate. Fuck you. Of course I am. Otherwise the stats are going to be wrong. They're not going to represent me. And even if, they need to know, I'm going to write trans women in this box. So if I tick female and I put trans women, then they'll know that I'm not a cis woman. Like, it's just so stupid. It's so relentlessly dumb. And it just shows that they're all in this rage about the difference between sex and gender, and they're all in a rage about forms, and they want to raise money, and they've got to feel like they're making progress, and they just haven't. None of them stopped to think. Loads of the big gender critical people are pushing this, like Jane Clare Jones, who wrote the article, and like they're all on it. And what, have none of them talked to a trans woman before? Well, no, they haven't, or a trans man. It's just completely garbage. It's such a joke. It's such a stupid, unreal that they're going to raise. Like, someone donated £500 to this. Like, what do they think's going to happen? It's just unreal. My God. Like, I think how much you can make so many people's lives better with £500. Donate it to some food thing for Texas where people are starving to death because the whole country's shut down because it's all icy or something. Like, £500 to sue the people who are running the census because the question is the same as it was for the last 40 years. What's wrong with you? And everyone's going to tick female anyway. Well, not everyone. All the trans women are, and all the trans men are going to tick male anyway. And then they're all going to write trans women and trans man in the box, and we're going to get all the data for everyone. Absolutely garbage. Like, complete brain rot. Like, I don't like using the word hysteria because it has the like connotations of being a completely made up medical condition for women to just pathologize women reacting to misogyny. But in its new meaning, where it's just like completely crazy, overhyped reaction where everyone's egging each other on. I mean, this is, in that sense, in the modern sense, a hysterical reaction because it's completely ridiculous, unfounded. I cannot express how stupid this is. Anyway, talking of stupid, we'll move on to the next thing. This is such a, oh God, gender critical people wind me up so much. So this person talking to Joanna Cherry, who is a major politician, saying, this homophobia and misogyny of trans people is now on the streets of Edinburgh too. This is currently outside the National Gallery of Modern Art. And here is 2 trans flags allegedly hung up in front of an art gallery with writing on them. And these horrible, despicable trans people. So let's just read what's on some of these flags. So the first thing says, cross-dressers are women, get over it. So my suspicion was instantly raised at this point because that's not something that trans people say or think. Anyway, okay, let's just move on. We are just as valid. We are part of the trans umbrella. Okay. Trans umbrella. Just so there are going to be a lot of people watching this who aren't as like down with gender critical dog whistles and memes and stuff. Trans umbrella is a thing that people talk about, but gender critical people really like it. So just tick that little one off in your mind. We are dating lesbians. Lesbians that don't want to date us are TERFs. Move over, bitches. We are more women than you'll ever be. Like, okay, right. The reason I'm laughing is not because of the sentiment, it's because this is the kind of thing that a gender critical person who has never engaged with a trans person or talked to one as a human, this is what they think. We think. And you'll see in a minute. So it goes on. We're in your spaces. Enjoy your erasure. Like, there are a few things like, we are dating lesbians is a thing that trans women and men, I guess, but trans women would say because, like, of course they are. Anyway, the one that really sealed the deal for me was genital preferences. Oh, so they've said trans women are women, things that are transphobic, female only spaces. No trans woman's ever said that. It's a complete joke. Genital preferences, cotton ceiling, pow, instantly 100%. I would bet my entire life earnings on the fact that this is definitely written by a gender critical person. Like, who in chat right now, I'm loving all the duck emojis, who in chat right now has even heard of the cotton ceiling? And if you've heard of the cotton ceiling, did you hear it from a trans person or did you hear it from a gender critical person? It's a dog whistle. It's a gender critical thing completely. And they believe that, so there's this, what a cotton ceiling is. Now you all got to learn one of their bullshit memes. It's it was like there was some talk that someone did in university in like 2009 or something. And they called it the cotton ceiling, and it was about how trans porn stars were struggling to find work because there were men and women who would sleep with like both men and women on camera, but they would then refuse to sleep with a trans person. It's talking about transphobia in the porn industry or something. I don't know, but they've kind of morphed it into this idea of trans people demanding that everyone have sex with them, and you're transphobic if you won't have sex with me right now. It's so ridiculous, but they all push this cotton ceiling thing because they think it radicalizes each other. So they've written it on here in the hope that someone will be like, oh, what's that? And they've also written genital preferences, which is another thing. Like, you know, trans people do talk about genital preferences. It's kind of bullshit, but this whole idea is they're trying to say, oh, trans people think if you won't suck a dick right now, then you're a transphobe. It's like, fuck off. No one thinks that. It's such a joke. It's homophobic garbage, and they all make up that that's what's being said, and that's what people think, and that's why they write this stuff. And they are stupid enough to think that that's what trans people are like. I mean, maybe it'll trick some people. That's the worry with these things. It's so blatant to me. Like, I am absolutely, without a shadow of a doubt, certain, like absolutely no doubt in my mind that a gender critical person wrote this. 100%. But that's because I spend all day, every day talking to them. And there might be some people who walk past this and they're like, they'll read some things and be like, genital preferences. I would only sleep with someone with, you know, the genitals that I like. And then they might look up cotton ceiling, and then they'll go down some blog rabbit hole, and, you know, that's how they radicalise people, I guess, making these things up. But it's so dishonest. It's so pathetic. Anyway, the reason this screenshot is dark mode rather than light mode like I usually do is because they lock their account when everyone piled on them for saying you're a liar. I mean, the person who put this tweet probably took that photo because they hung the flag up themselves. Reminds me of this other time when they stuck up this sticker saying genital preferences are transphobic, and importantly with the like new pride flag, which has the trans flag and then a black and a brown stripe, to like highlight people of colour and intersectional crossover with LGBT rights. Like it, someone got a screenshot of the person on some people on Facebook by getting their private Facebook or whatever of them discussing that they put this up. Like, this is a gender critical thing. This is a gender critical meme. It's like they've constructed it because they want it to make it look like trans people do it. But obviously most trans people would look at this and be like TERF stuck that up. Like, no trans person stuck that up. And like they still push this picture. They wouldn't know that this is a false flag operation. Like the last one was literally a false flag. But they all know it is, and they just carry on anyway because they just want to radicalize people. They're not. This isn't the kind of strategy that you get from movements that have a good idea that they're selling to people. They're trying to trick people into reacting because this is what got them. Like, they saw this and they believed it, and now they want to tell everyone else it. But it was a joke all along. Like, you got radicalized by something that's not true. That's pathetic. And I like this reaction from our mate, who we've seen a few times in TERF Wars, the old Trump Brexit England flag guy. He's like, obviously there was a huge reaction to this. Trans people like, this is like, independently, everyone was just like, this is made up. Total joke. And then he's like, we're obviously supposed to assume that this was written by a gender critical person posing as a trans person, but I suspect it was a trans person trying to insinuate that GCs would stoop so low and to such transparent methods. Why would a trans person go and write a load of stuff that makes trans people look bad on a trans flag and stick it upside? It's not 4D chess, mate. You guys are all trying to do some subterfuge bullshit, but like, that's not. We don't need to do that. It's nonsense. Such a joke. I just think it's so funny. Like, desperate to blame it on the fact that it's trans people. Everything is trans people's fault. But on the like conspiracy angle, like gender critical is getting more conspiratorial. Like, I'm sure everyone's noticed this. It's got worse in the last year. I think probably from lockdown, like conspiracy theories have really got worse for everyone in the last year. it's just getting a bit more extreme. And this is what I talk about on my Saturday podcast, XX Factor, with Krista Peterson. So tune in tomorrow, 9 p.m. UK time. So it's this time, if you want to talk more about the conspiracy angle and like we answer questions and things. But anyway, so here's someone talking to What the Trans podcast, which is another good podcast that you should all check out. So like, we know you're funded by Big Pharma and Big Tech trying to normalise body modification in line with radical transhumanist agenda. You have a lot of money, but you have to advance by stealth because if the light is shone on your ideas, they're so deeply flawed and dangerous. Like, I don't know how anyone could read that and not think conspiracy theory nut job. Radical transhumanist agenda. Like, we have loads of money, but we have to do it secretly. Like, we're fighting for the ability to go to the toilet in some places. We don't have a huge lobbying force, or that wouldn't be on the line. I wouldn't be fearing that I might need to leave the country if the wrong people get into power or they push for some bathroom bill or something. Anyway, What the Trans, like, who's funding us? And then they say Martine Rothblatt, for one, springs to mind. Okay. And then they've said, so What the Trans is like, don't know who that is. And someone else is like, look up Martine Rothblatt. And while you're at it, look up Jennifer Pritzker and John Stryker. And then you will see all of the social engineering orgs make money. Blah, blah, blah. Just happens. I'm sure it's totally a coincidence. Like, just a coincidence that these three people are all Jewish. Sure, that's just a coincidence that there's a secret, big lobby funding, pulling the strings, just happen to all be Jewish. Just some transhumanist agenda to destroy Western culture. It's just a coincidence, guys. But anyway, it's not like any of the these are just two crazy conspiracy theory types. It's not like Jane Clare Jones is who writes for the Telegraph, who's one of the influential people, is talking about this. So she says, so what the trans, like this, so this is that last tweet they've said here. It's new on me. Are you arguing that trans healthcare came from her? Jane Clare Jones says, no, we are arguing that the denial of sex came from her, this Jewish billionaire, along with the massive transhumanist body dominating immortality project. What? I just want to go to the toilet, mate. Leave me alone. Jesus, we know so much more about the history of your own movement than you do. Typically, yeah, the reason why you know more about the massive transhumanist body dominating immortality project than we do is because you made it up. My goodness, it's so mad. I cannot believe that they're just talking about this in the open as if it doesn't look insane. Like, what are you doing? Who believes this stuff? Absolutely mad. Like, quite a lot of them tweeting about this. Obviously George Soros is involved too. Quite other big names were saying this. Like, a lot of them are in on it. That sounds like a conspiracy thing. A lot of them, they're not in on some conspiracy. A lot of them are just literally saying something about transhumanism and Jewish billionaires. They're just saying that openly. As if that's a sensible, not crazy, not conspiratorial thing to say. Mad. Anyway, moving on. Different type of crazy now. So you might remember from last week, we had a little look at Brighton and Sussex University Hospital's new guidelines, which said, just quickly skimming over it, we're going to go for a gender additive approach, which means using gender neutral language alongside the language of womanhood. The decision has been taken following extensive discussions with locals. If we only use gender neutral language, we risk marginalising or erasing the experience of some women and some people who use our services. We understand the fear of erasure, however, marginalising other groups because they're rare will not improve care for women. So basically they're saying here, just be aware that some people are trans men, some people are non-binary people, and they might be using like maternity services, and they might not want it to be called a mother. They might not want to be called, to be told they're a woman, basically, because they're not. So call everyone a woman apart from the people who that doesn't apply to. Like, that's fairly sensible, and that's about as like that's like the perfect compromise, isn't it? Because you could just say, we're just going to use gender neutral language for everyone because 1 in 1,000 people are trans people, and that's like, I mean, you could argue that was fine, maybe that's your position, but some people obviously are wound up by that, and this is a compromise between that position and call everyone a woman whether they're a man or not. Pretty fair. Which, of course, the Times, as we saw last week, just completely made up that they were banning the word mother. But of course, all of the idiots piled on this week, and it's still going strong, and there's still this ridiculous conspiracy theory. You can just read this. It's just public. You can literally just go and look up what their policy is and how they very carefully, explicitly mentioning how they're not going to erase womanhood. Like that is very clear throughout this document. So Ulrika Johnson, who's some, I don't know, who is she? Some UK celebrity, has said, I'm not anti-trans just because I call myself a mother. No, you're not. Okay, why did you write an article in The Sun? I'm not anti-trans just because I wear shoes. I'm not anti-trans just because I drove a car yesterday. I'm not anti-trans because I happen to be holding a paintbrush. A makeup brush. No, you're not, of course. That's completely made up. But you're obviously trying to insinuate that just calling yourself a mother makes you anti-trans, as if anyone has ever said that. I am a trans woman, and hopefully I'm going to start a family in the future. And when I do, I'm going to be a mother. That's what I want, of course. And I want, that's how I'm going to refer to myself. Of course. What do you do? It's such a clash with this going on about how trans women are going to call themselves women and erase, we're not going to be able to tell them apart. And now they're saying, trans women are saying, you're not allowed to call yourself women. These are two contradictory things that you're making up. Pick one of them. But Ulrika Johnson was not the craziest of the reactions to this week. We got this absolutely spectacular headline. Just take a moment, because you're not going to be ready for this if you haven't seen it. So, from Janet Street Porter, who's some other celebrity, I don't know. I'm all for transgender people getting equal treatment, but please don't make me sacrifice my breasts in the name of political correctness. What are you talking about? I understand she might not have written this headline. They often have headline writers. I would be so embarrassed if an article got published and my name, that's it's written like it's a quote from her. Sorry, I've got a cat hair in my eye. Absolutely mad. So next level crazy. This is from them reading this Times article, not doing any research, not doing any journalism, because the UK does not do journalism when it comes to trans people. It does relentless propaganda. Of course the trans people have said you're not allowed to be a mother. Of course they said you've got to sacrifice your breasts. So anyway, that's why I wore this top, because I wanted to sacrifice my breasts live on air. So got my trusty Mayo smashing hammer. What are you talking about? My goodness, so ridiculous. But you're speechless how stupid this is. How stupid this whole thing is. Some committed transphobic loser just decided to make up a story about trans people, and now all these C-list celebrities are getting in a rage about sacrificing their breasts in the mainstream press. This was for the Daily Mail, and the last one was for the Sun. So these major newspapers. And trans people aren't going to get to say, no one's going to get corrected this. There are going to be millions of people who see this and just think trans people want you to not call them mothers. That's explicitly what I want. I don't want people it just doesn't make any sense. I can't believe I have to explain this. They know that trans women have breasts, and it's even a meme that often they accuse every trans woman of having breast implants, which is nonsense, because trans women grow their own breasts. But so how can you simultaneously think that, but also think trans people want to get rid of the word breast? It just doesn't make any sense. It's just brain dead. Absolute brain rot. The brain rot's setting in this episode already. Anyway, while we're ramping up to the fallen brain rot, we're going to finish with the generic brain rot. We better speed up a little bit. This was a major scrap, and I hope this doesn't come across a bit petty, but I got in a scrap with this particular person because they wound me up a little bit. And so I just thought I'd talk you through, as it's a very common pattern that I encounter. So this is what started it. Some cis man has said, transsexual women are far more marginalised group than cis women. And that's like an inflammatory post, really. I mean, you could easily argue that that was true, but I just don't think that counting up like marginalisation points is useful. I mean, I think, especially when you include two groups, you can say trans people are more marginalised than cis people, obviously, like no contest. And you could say that, women are more marginalised than men. You can certainly make that argument. I mean, that's a view that a lot of people hold, but obviously that kind of implies that men aren't marginalised sometimes, and men can be marginalised in certain contexts, but generally overall women have it worse, and I guess you can compare that. But then to compare trans women to cis women starts like mixing things in. It's like the thing where you say like, who's more oppressed, a white woman or a black man? Like, it's just not really, you don't really gain anything from comparing those. What we should be saying is we're combating racial oppression, we're combating misogynistic oppression or sexist oppression. Anyway, I did actually DM this guy and be like, wasn't the best tweet, but I agree with the sentiment, which is him replying to someone who's like, trans women have it really hard. Trans people have it really hard. A better tweet would be, trans people are oppressed and cis people are not. Fuck off. Anyway, one of the good ones replied, mate, must be a man. Mate, I am a transsexual woman. Oh, by the way, for anyone who doesn't know, it's like a running theme that I always say mate, and they always call me a man for it. Mate, I am a transsexual woman of considerable vintage. I am so marginalised that I am, amongst other things, an academic, writer, tutor, and explorer. So, this is it's kind of starting off garbage already. I mean, they could, before we see the rest of this tweet, they could be reacting to how it's not really good to compare those, but they're not. They're saying, I can't be marginalised because I'm an academic and a writer and that's obviously garbage. Like, oh, women aren't marginalised because, Queen Elizabeth. This is such a stupid argument. You personally might not feel marginalised because you might be rich, but that doesn't mean people like you aren't marginalised. Rubbish argument. Anyway, she then goes on to say, I'll never experience the oppression and sexual violence women face on a daily basis across the globe. You know that, of course. And this winds me up because trans women do face oppression and sexual violence that women face. It's targeted at women, and that ends up hitting some trans women, of course, obviously. And it's horrific, and trans women are more likely to be sexually assaulted and sexually abused. And it's like, I hate this denial in general. It's this kind of denying the fact that trans women face misogyny in order to hold the worldview up. But what really winds me up about these things is when it comes from a trans woman, and it's one of these people who is like desperate for validation from anyone, and they found out a good way of getting it is to disagree with trans rights, make things up about trans people, say they're bad, and then all of the transphobes they love it. They love, bigots always love the someone from the group they're hating against speaking up and agreeing with them. There are people who are like famous for this. Like Candace Owens saying that BLM doesn't matter and stuff is a very famous example, I guess. It's just a very classic thing. It's the I'm one of the good ones thing, and it's actually what my next video is going to be on. But it's just bullshit. So I jumped in saying, It's literally just objectively false that trans women don't experience misogynistic sexism and sexual violence. I guess you've lied about this for validation. I mean, that's a fact. Both of those are facts. They've obviously lied about it for validation. Like, there's no way that someone who, like, according to this person, they, like, had GRS, like, 20 years ago. There's no way they've been out as a trans woman for 20 years and haven't experienced misogyny. Garbage. Of course they have. And they're lying about it because they want all these cool points of all of their transphobic friends, which we'll go into in a bit more. But this person then, like, so that was my first reply. Like, this is my opening reply to them. Then they've said, absolutely classic gender critical, they've said, attempting to engage in rational debate with a professional trans woman and men's rights activist like Montgomery is like farting into a bitter easterly wind, except the smell is rather less fragrant. Then someone's replied saying, oh, that demented pantomime nonce, and then they've laughed along with them. So they've made a claim, trans women don't face misogynistic sexism and sexual violence. I've said, well, that's false. And then they've said, oh, you can't have a rational debate, you smell, and you're a men's rights activist, and you're a nonce. It's just such projection. Where's your rational debate that you're attempting to engage with? They've called me a professional trans woman. I'm not a professional engineer. They said I'm a men's rights activist, but then they're the one denying misogyny. They've said that, like, I'm not engaging in rational debate, but they've just said I smell and that I'm a paedophile. Like, what is wrong with these people? It's so pathetic. I don't know. Like, imagine that you really, really, like, you're opposed to trans rights and you really, really, really want to see a trans person saying, I don't like trans rights either, because it makes you feel like you're not transphobic. And then you see one of them doing this. Like, I would just feel so embarrassed. I couldn't support this person. Even if I hated this Katie Montgomery person, even if I hated trans people, I couldn't have so little integrity that I would look at this and be like, yes, this person is in the right. They're the real rational one. It's just utterly, crushingly embarrassing. But they didn't stop. They just got worse and worse. Absolute idiot, this person. So they're doing another little gender critical dance, which makes absolutely no sense. And it makes even less sense when you're a trans person because you've experienced all the reasons for all of these things. So they've said, cis people, don't you mean men and women? Because they've got this, like, don't call me cis thing. They don't like the word cis because you need the word cis to analyse oppression against trans people. But this is, like, they've not even done a good job of the don't call me cis argument. I could argue this better because I know what their strong and weak arguments. Like, I don't mean men and women when I say cis, because trans men and women are men and women, or women and men if you want. If you're the kind of knobhead who says trans women are men, if you say trans women are men, then trans people are still men and women, aren't they? So when you say men and women, you don't mean cis people, you mean trans and cis people. It's so basic. It's the most basic set theory failing that, like, a toddler could understand. And they make this argument, like, I don't think that they have thought this in their mind and they've got to a conclusion. They've started off with a conclusion, cis is bad and we should just call people men and women. That's where they've started. And then they just work backwards and they just get something that to them sounds kind of right. And then they just don't analyse it because they're not allowed to analyse it because then it will all come crumbling down. So that's why you end up with this, just like who can't see that this doesn't make sense? It's so basic. And I see this so much. It's so common. Like, if you think that sex is binary and everyone is either a man or a woman and there's no alternatives to that, and then you say, well, some people are trans and some people are not trans, then men and women doesn't describe all the people that aren't trans, because that would make trans people not men and women, which is a counter to your earlier argument. Crushingly basic. Then someone's like, so I said, everything about your worldview is so surface level dumb. Because I was already a bit frustrated here because they're, one of these trans people who's so pathetic that they have to get, like, validation points off people by selling other trans people out. They're pathetic to start. Then they called me a load of names and claimed that they were rational. So I was just like, God, you're so stupid. Like, And then someone's like, why are you always patronising people and insulting them? I mean, to be honest, calling someone surface level dumb is an insult. That is me being patronising, insulting. I owned up to that. I was like, well, yes, I feel it's justified because blah, blah, blah. And then our friend has come in saying it's the default position of people losing an argument. They crank up the abuse because the reality of being trans, blah, blah, blah. So if you're saying that people who crank up the abuse, bearing in mind that just earlier you called me a men's rights activist who smells and who is a pedo and a pantomime and demented, like, so I didn't start with the insults, mate. Like, my goodness, so pathetic. So this might seem a little bit petty. We'll get to some more good points about this, but like, so here's those two idiots from earlier. They're like, that nonce, blah, 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 calling me a nonce again. This was our mate from last episode who called me a Trojan horse. I don't know if you remember that. But then just look how embarrassing this tweet is. Montgomery will get the pronouns Montgomery deserves. They certainly won't be the pronouns Montgomery thinks Montgomery deserves. Oh, yeah, you're not in a cult, mate, of course. It's just so embarrassing. It's like a 2-year-old. I mean, I guess this is what you have to do for validation when you're desperate for validation. Just look at it. Look at the state of it. Spelled my name wrong as well 4 times in one small tweet. Anyway, I kept poking them, obviously. Here's someone saying Montgomery's this I only included this one. This is an absolute classic, and they all say this all the time. Montgomery's can't even say Katie. This is a trans woman, by the way. Katie's constant and increasingly hysterical assertions that she is really a woman always remind me of that childish aphorism, blah, blah, blah. Anyway, increasingly hysterical assertions that I'm a woman. This is like a meme. I see this, like, I've been accused of this so many times. I guess it must be like some poetic thing that they like to say, but like, I rarely say like, I am a woman. I don't really feel like the need to say that. Everyone I care about knows. It's not like I tweet this all the time. I don't go around, like, just go and search my tweets. I don't go around saying trans women are women. I don't go around saying I'm a woman, because it, just sets you up to get arguments anyway. So they just make this is just made up. I haven't said it in this conversation. I haven't said it to this person ever. I very rarely need to say it, and I only ever use it in examples when I'm talking about misogyny that I have faced as an example of misogyny that trans women face. And then, of course, they have to call me hysterical, and we talked about the misogynistic meaning behind hysterical earlier, which may or may not have been applied here, probably was. It's just meaningless. They just make this up, and it's just for validation, and it's just pathetic. I don't know, there's this like feeling I get when I see like people like this attempting to argue, and I just like, it's just so embarrassing. I can't believe that you do this in public in front of people. I'm going to open a beer with this thing that's got my name on it. See, it says Montgomery, he, him. Pathetic. My goodness. Saying pathetic a lot this episode. Well, it's about to get more pathetic, I think. So this thread kicked off and there was loads of people involved. Someone accused me of hating women, because, they always do, which is nonsense. So this person's saying, can you show that she insults all women and not specific women? To be honest, that's not the best argument. Thanks for defending me. But like, even if someone only insults specific women, if they only insult women, like if they only insult, say they hate communists and they only insult communist women and they're not insulting communist men, then you can ask a question, maybe they're misogynistic. Why are they only attacking the women? Which does happen. But anyway, I can see what they're going for. Like, I don't insult women. And in fact, the only person I've insulted all day here is a trans woman who I've called dumb. And this person and the trans woman I'm talking about think trans women are men. So I'm not targeting women even by their of course it's not even remotely consistent. So this person's like, so insulting specific women is okay then, is it? I mean, yes, of course. And then is raping some women okay too? Hitting some women because they deserve it. Please listen to yourself. No, please listen to yourself. Like, what is this utter ridiculous attempt at some kind of slippery slope argument? Like, or what? Are they saying you're not even allowed to insult women at all now? You know, someone like Melania Trump or Margaret Thatcher. Like, Margaret Thatcher, on her actions alone, was a horrible person. She introduced Section 28, and that alone was so homophobic and transphobic, so bullshit that I can say she was a horrible, disgusting person who did great damage to millions of people. Like, and insult her, and I would say she's a piece of shit. And that's justified because she is. Sometimes you insult people, and sometimes the people you insult are women. If you were only insulting women, or if you're more insulting women, or if you're targeting women, it's a totally different situation. And then to just like, it's raping someone, that's just so disgusting. It's just using rape as a tool to try and back up the idea that I shouldn't be allowed to call someone dumb when they've said something as dumb as cis means men and women. Oh, it's just so pathetic. Scraping the barrel to try and defend something that's indefensible. Nonsense. This person, we're entering brain rot zone now. I really need to speed up. We're nearly at an hour already. The only men who would subject trans women to sexual violence are members of LGBT. So maybe you should take the complaint up with Stonewall. Leave hetero men out of the discussion. Fucking hell. The stuff that they believe. Absolute garbage. Like, I would guess that all of the murders of trans women last year were by straight men. That's my guess. I mean, it's credible. I don't know for sure. Total garbage. Anyway, our friend who started their account in 2012, so long before me, who actually had like nearly 10,000 followers, got suspended. I thought that it was because they were calling me a man, but I just checked my emails just before the show and I didn't have one, so I don't think it was me. But they must have gone on some validation, desperate, pathetic, misgendering rampage to try and get some validation points because they're feeling insecure because I called them out for it and they got their account suspended. So, what a waste. Where are you going to get your validation from now, mate? Anyway, this just brings me on to my favourite interaction with this person, which was actually from last year in May. So they're arguing about whether trans people change sex or not. Someone's like, trans women alter their biological reality in significant ways, blah, blah, blah. And then our friend has said, it doesn't alter biological reality at all. The cosmetic surgery is purely This is someone who allegedly had genital reassignment surgery 20 years ago, who reckons that their biology hasn't changed. How can you, this is why, when I meet like a cis person who's gender critical and they'll say something like this, I'm like, well, you're just an idiot. You don't know anything about biology, you don't know anything about trans healthcare, and you're just saying what you want to be true. But when it's a trans person, there's no way that she's just ignorant of this. When you talk to so many doctors who explain what's going on, and she must know that having her gonads removed requires hormone changes, and it changes like so much about you, your fat redistribution, your emotions, like your biology changes so much. And so she's lying for validation. There's no other explanation. There's no way that this person is ignorant when she had surgery over 20 years ago. Nonsense. So this person's like, of course it does. Hormones alter all kinds of things. For example, resulting in the growth of breast tissue. Blah, blah, blah. And then our friend has said, these are not biological changes. The surgery is cosmetic. Hormones change the distribution of body fat. I mean, that is changing biology. So, idiot. But then she said, one does not grow breasts. Okay. So then one of their mates chimed in, because I said, well, that's bullshit. You've grown breasts on hormones. And then one of their friends has said, No, you have not grown additional lobules and or ducts through hormone treatment. You have redistributed fat and got gynecomastia, which is like moobs, I guess, when men have breast-like growth. And then they posted a photo. And I think, they then linked the paper the photo was from, and they said, left is from a cis woman, right is from a trans woman. Sorry, mate. Here's the mate thing. I must have called them mate. And they got leery about it because they always do. So, so anyway, they've linked some papers about trans women breast growth, from which they've posted some photos from. So why don't we have a little look? Oh, so just to be sure, our friend liked this tweet. This was backing up the point they were making. So let's just look at the paper. Oh, it's a little bit small here, so I'm just going to have to lean in a bit. But, so this is from Women's Imaging Review, Volume 202. It's like a scientific paper. And they've compared trans women and cis women's breasts. And they have said in the paper explicitly, transgender women can develop a spectrum of breast tissue density, including heterogeneously dense and extremely dense breast tissue. The breast tissue that develops should not be referred to as gynecomastia. One study has shown that this tissue closely resembles breast tissue seen in natal women because it contains lobules. Of course, they came in with a nonsense claim and they linked a paper which said literally, word for word, the exact opposite of what they claimed it did. Every time that they link me a paper, it says the opposite of what. It's always worth just reading the papers, gender critical people. I had never even encountered this paper before, and now I know about it because some idiot showed it to me and proved themselves wrong. So it was in everyone's advantage apart from theirs. But I just thought it was such a, imagine being so pathetic that you're lying about the fact that you must know you've grown breasts. Come off it. In 20 years of hormone replacement therapy, you've grown breasts and you know it. Why would you lie about this? And then someone just chucks up a study and you just like it without even reading it. And then it turns out word for word, everything they said is wrong. Just gender critical trans people 101, that is. In the end, the validation they get from these transphobic people, which we're just going to look at now, this is why they do it. Throughout this argument I was having with them, where they quote tweeted me and I never quote tweeted them once because that's their thing. And for anyone who doesn't know, that's where when you do a quote tweet, all of your followers see your argument and they will come piling in. And throughout this whole thing, constantly in my mentions were people writing things like this, oh, I love you. You're a breath of fresh air, a true supporter of women. I love all of your travel journal. Katie's so shit. I love you. Oh, I love you. And this is why they write it, because they get all of this love and people calling them a women and validating them, which all people need to some extent. Everyone likes being loved and everyone likes being treated like a human. And the best way to get it from transphobic people is to say something transphobic, and then they all want you on their team and they love bomb you. And this is all love bombing. And as soon as this person puts a foot out of line, if one day they say they have grown breasts, or that if they go to the pub after lockdown and they get sexually assaulted and they wrote about it on Twitter, which they can't do anymore because they got suspended, but if they did write it on Twitter, then they would get a pylon from gender critical people saying they're a liar, and then all of these people who've written all this love stuff will be calling them a paedophile and all this kind of stuff, because it's fake. They just say this because they need. This is what my next video is going to go into, but briefly, it's because it's like the symbiotic relationship. The trans person, the true trans person, one of the good ones, gets to get validation in exchange for lying about trans people, and the transphobes get to feel like they're not being transphobic because they're loving this person who's a trans person. And that's why it happens. That's why we get these little pathetic displays of self-owning. Anyway, on to Brain Rot Zone. We'll fire through some brain rot. So, hope that little argument I had wasn't too petty. So this person says, that's AA, tad reductive Katie. Let's go. Imagine people expecting Lewis Hamilton's kids to become racing drivers simply because he is one. And if I disagree and say there's too much pressure, let them grow and decide. Would I be anti-race car driverist? Why? Why are you so stupid? So, oh, do I really have to? Being a race car driver is not the same as being an LGBT person. You're not born a race car driver. You have to learn to drive. You don't learn to become LGBT. But importantly, another point which might be hidden behind how stupid this is, and also the fact he's put anti and then ist, so it's kind of a double negative. LGBT people don't come from other LGBT people. Like, a gay person doesn't have two gay parents. Like, that's not how it works. This is so stupid. Anyway, wrong way. Next. So this is pretty grim. These predatory trans freaks are doing exactly what gay people had to spend decades proving we weren't doing. Forcing ourselves on them. This will destroy LGBT progress. Okay, maybe the they were saying that gay people were bad for all those years, and that was all false, but maybe trans people are that bad. Or maybe it's the exact same prejudice for the exact same reasons, and this time it's not directed at you, so you've just bought into it. That's just sad when you see gay people like falling for stuff that was thrown at them for literally decades, and even still today, and they'll just eat it up when it's trans people for some reason. Like, it's so dumb. This one was pretty frustrating. I wasn't sure whether to include this one, but I just wanted to rant about it. So here's a lovely picture of Juno Dawson and her fiance or husband. I can't remember. I'm really sorry, Juno. Juno's wicked, and you should all follow her. And I think she has a book coming out soon, or just came out, about trans people, and you should all go and get it because I'm sure it's amazing. I haven't read it yet. I do plan to, if I ever read a book ever again. Anyway, so this is some loser who also posted a picture of Juno from before she transitioned, which I've decided not to include because it's a dick move and it's not my position to do that, and this person shouldn't have posted it. It's pathetic. Anyway, they're saying on the left is before she came out, on the right's after she came out, in their own stupid language. Do you see how she is acting out hyper-feminized, regressive idea of womanhood? So it's a picture of her wearing a red dress, sitting on her husband's lap. And the picture that they included before was her like wearing a shirt. This is such a classic. There's so many things on this. I could do a whole flipping episode on this. They are, for a start, it's just a woman wearing a dress sitting on her husband's lap. Like, how many women have done that for a photo? Who are alive today? 2 billion? Like, that is not a rare situation. If you're criticising women for acting out stereotypical femininity, why would you target just trans women when all women do it? Not all women, but like, it's so common. It's such a common thing. If you want to rail against how femininity is enforced on women, great. Like, it is, at least to an extent. That's undeniable. And perhaps if you're a radical feminist, you think that the whole concept of femininity is constructed and forced upon all women and it wouldn't happen otherwise. You can make that argument, but if you do, it's completely bullshit to only target trans women. It's like what I was saying about earlier with insulting people. Like, if you're insulting all communists because you don't like communism, that's fine. Unless you're a communist and you disagree with that. Like, if you're insulting all whoever, I just pick, Anyway, but if you're just insulting the women, then that probably means you're a misogynist. And it's the same here. If you have a problem with stereotypical femininity for whatever reason, make your argument. But if you have a problem with it for some reason only when trans women do it, then that's just transphobia. Like, just transparently, that's just transphobia. It's just It's just so pathetic. And then also to pick 2 photo shoots. Like, one was a photo shoot from before she came out where she obviously had to look nice for work or something. I don't know. Don't go and look for the photo. I'm sure she doesn't want you to see it. And then the other one, they've obviously gone for some stylist. Like, they're in some armchair and like he's looking really smart. It's probably at a wedding or something. And she's doing like a pose. Like, it's just like copying like something from culture, and it's just fun. And people do photo shoots. And just because she has a photo shoot where she's really made up and all nice, doesn't mean she does that all the time. I'm sure she's just in her dressing gown drinking wine at the moment. Like, it's just nonsense. It's selective garbage to just target trans women for something that loads of people do. Nonsense. But then this person, so I think this person comes up again. A male who decides to make himself look, oh God, it's hard to read. A trans woman who decides to make herself look like what she really thinks will be sexually alluring to men is making some interesting life choices. If they then want to complain about how they're being objectified misogynistically, I would recommend they review their life choices. This is a classic victim-blaming, gender-critical, sexist, openly misogynistic argument. They're just saying, if you're getting misogynistic comments, maybe don't choose to look like that. Which is, every feminist recognises that as misogynistic. And well, yeah, it's the woman's fault for looking too sexy. That's the real reason. It's straight up victim blaming. And you'll see this from people claiming to be feminists, and like suddenly they get brain rot and they'll do it to trans people and they won't see the exact same thing that they've fought against their entire life. So pathetic. But like, if you think transitioning is a choice, like a free choice that anyone can make, and you don't like misogyny, why don't you transition into a man? Is the reason because it would ruin your life because you're not a trans person? Maybe that's why no cis women transition. Joke. Anyway, I'm not getting angry. So this is an embarrassing slam dunk. This is our idiot friend from the last post who said, same-sex attraction, sex bodies matter, gender... Like, it's just a generic LGBT Alliance style post. And I've said, people are attracted to what they can sense, not invisible magic. No one is attracted to what gametes you technically could produce as a baby if you were to grow, like whatever their gamete potential is. No one's attracted to that because you cannot sense it. You can't see it, you can't smell it, you can't touch it, you can't know it, and someone could lie to you and you wouldn't even know. Fact. Sexuality is only based on what you can sense. And then this person comes in with a little smarmy reply. If appearances were all that mattered, you'd be happy to eat plastic fruit, dear. Good thing that sight isn't the only sense. When I eat plastic fruit, I can sense the texture and the taste. So this completely backfired. Rubbish attempt at an argument, not addressing the actual point, trying to make some little rhetorical device to stop everyone thinking about the point that I really made. That's what's really important here. It's just another example of like, here's a thing that I can say, which to me gives me reason to stop thinking. Like, I'm sure that solves the problem, so I won't investigate any further. And it just means nothing. And as soon as you interrogate, even beyond surface level, it falls apart and it's all rubbish. Always. So here's another good mum's neck comment. So they're discussing how increasing transphobia is causing cis women to get more abuse in women's bathrooms because they're not conforming to gender stereotypes. Because obviously, if you go and tell everyone that men are sneaking into women's bathrooms, then all the sexist dickheads who think someone with short hair is a man will harass all the women with short hair, obviously. As if it was ever going to go any differently. So this person says, if a woman is so masculine looking that other women might take her for a man, she will usually go out of her way to make other women feel comfortable by doing something to signify she is female. This is normal already. In the highly unlikely situation that someone really thought she was a bloke, she could show her driving license or other ID that she would no doubt be carrying, as this kind of thing would happen a lot. Like, my goodness, just imagine writing that out and thinking your problem was solved. There's so many layers of bullshit here. Firstly, lots of people don't carry their driving license or passport around. And why should they have to? Like, oh, you've chosen your image, or maybe you just naturally look a certain way, which gets you abuse from transphobic bigots who think you're a man. That's their problem, and you shouldn't have to carry your passport around. Some people don't have a passport or a driving license. Why should they have to get one and carry one around? Because, like, dickheads who are empowered by gender critical people lying about trans people in the news have now starting to harass them on the street for not looking feminine enough. That's disgusting. What are you on about? But then, to add the next layer of nonsense, that is, you can self-ID driving licenses and passports. So mine say F on them. So I could just show mine, and then it doesn't solve the problem that you're complaining about, which is trans women in the bathrooms, which is already stupid. But just to cap it off, they said she could do something to signify she is female. Like what? I would say, oh, I'm actually a woman. And then they'd be like, no, you're not. Show me your ID. Then I show me my ID and it says woman on it. And then what? That's the same thing as cis women would do. Or what do they want me to, like, ovulate in front of them? Like, oh no, I can't do it. Oh, like, what are you talking? Do something to signify? Like, what can you signify? They just don't think about it at all, because if they thought about it, it would crumble apart and then they wouldn't be able to defend their positions. So that's off limits. You can't think these things through. So this was from a gender critical man who were sleazy as always. Come out with this absolute banger. So, ladies, listen out. This guy, he would like to meet a non-trans, can't say cis, but still got to talk about the concept of cis people and just relabel it. I would like to meet non-trans, non-drag, binary, woman-identifying, female vagina person. Is there a single dating app for my fetish? I hope not. Write that in your bio, mate. Just open an app. Just open every single app. Put that in your bio. And if anyone at all matches with you, marry them. Because you're not going to get much interest. I mean, probably the best dating app for this is Mumsnet, to be honest, because that's where all the people who talk like this hang out. Woman identifying female vagina person. Ugh. And it's just worth pointing out that they've said non-trans, because they'll say, don't call me cis. And you'll be like, well, okay, so either you have a problem with the word or you have a problem with the concept. And they have a problem with the concept. But they won't say that. They'll say they have a problem with the word. And I'm like, okay, what can I call you instead? Just pick any word and I'll just use that instead of cis. We'll just say non-trans. And they'll be like, I'm not non-trans, you don't define people, blah, blah, blah. And whatever you pick instead of cis, they're always angry about and they don't like, because it's not the word, it's the concept. They don't like you having a word for the concept of people who aren't trans people, because then you can discuss oppression of trans people by cis people, or, you know, by cis-normative society, etc., etc. Stand a feminist analysis of these, like, power structures. But then sometimes they need to describe the group of people who are not trans people. So then they'll say non-trans. It's like, well, if you're saying non-trans, I mean, I'll say non-trans instead of cis if it's going to have a conversation. But, you know, cis literally means non-trans. So you're already talking about the concept. So you might as well use the word that we already have for it, but it's literally 2,400 years old. It's nonsense. It's just one of the things where their worldview doesn't stand up, but sometimes they need to step outside of their worldview in order to express some concept that their worldview doesn't allow them to express. And they just hope it sneaks under the radar. Nonsense. Trans women abhor the very idea of women's rights. I hate women who can vote, and I hate women who can drive, and I'm a woman who wants to vote and can drive. Doesn't even, like, surface level again. That's the theme. That's the real theme of this episode. None of this makes sense if you even apply surface level scrutiny to it. And I just thought I'd end on this. So we're ending on this masterpiece. Here is some losers protesting outside some kind of thing for children. I don't know. Should have looked it up. I think this is in America, but it might be in Canada. Holding all their crazy Westboro Baptist style signs saying stop transing gay kids, protect kids from big pharma, you know, all the standard anti-trans concern bullshit. This is from parents of ROGD kids. ROGD is a conspiracy theory that being trans is like a fashion statement, basically, or a social contagion. Total nonsense. Anyway, let's just zoom in on their sign that they spent a load of money on. LBG Fight Back Dog. Do you mean LGB? They printed the wrong website on their sign, which they spent a load of money on because it's like it's got little ring pulls in the corner. Like they aren't that cheap, these signs. They spent a load of money on this, and they wrote the wrong website on it because most LGBT people are used to writing LGBT, and as soon as they see LBG, like it, flags in your mind because you're used to seeing the pattern. When you're straight parents who actually hate LGBT people full stop, but you would, you hate trans people even more than gay people, and you want to use gay people as a tool to attack trans people with, you're right, LBG. So I can't even say it wrong. You're right, LBG, without thinking about it and won't notice, even though there's this was a huge protest. There was 5, 6 people maybe. But anyway, of course, someone noticed and has bought this website, and it now points to a trans rights website. So amazing. Like the good thing is that although the people we're up against in general, there's a lot of them. They have the status quo, and they have a lot of people in power. They have the media. What they don't have are people who are good at things and good ideas and rational arguments and a worldview that stands up under even basic scrutiny. So, they'll get some more wins before this is over, but I just won't stand up because it's all garbage. Anyway, so that was all of our slides. That was a lot of slides. Took a bit longer than the average episode, but it's all good. It's fun to go through some of the garbage from the week. I hope that everyone enjoyed it. Thank you very much for watching. Thanks for staying around. Thanks for keeping the chat lively. It's really exciting seeing all the chats going on. Thank you for all of the duck emojis, everyone. For anyone who doesn't know what that is, should have turned up early for the makeup stream, shouldn't you? So anyway, I hope that you have sacrificed your breasts to the trans political agenda. I hope that you visit lbgfightback.org. I hope that you tick the biological box on the census, which you obviously didn't do for the last 30 years. I hope you have a good week and happy Friday, and maybe see you tomorrow for the XX Factor. Lots of love to everyone. I love you all. Thanks for turning up. And I'll see you all next week.